Ever daydreamed about living in the Middle Ages? Knights in shining armor, majestic castles, perhaps a simpler time? Well, park those romantic notions right now because we're about to yank the medieval welcome mat out from under you. We've dug up 33 everyday realities from that era, so utterly bizarre, so hilariously unhygienic, and so profoundly weird, you'll be kissing your indoor plumbing and Wi-Fi router with newfound gratitude. Prepare for a historical joyride into the truly absurd. 1. First on our list of You Couldn't Make This Up, a story that's a true chef's kiss of medieval madness. Picture this. Erfurt, Germany, the year 1184. King Henry VI calls a big meeting, a Hoftag, basically a medieval VIP convention. All the important nobles, bishops, and bigwigs are there, crammed into the upper floor of a building at St. Peter's Monastery. They're probably discussing very serious medieval things like whose pointy hat is pointier or where to conquer next. Suddenly, crack! The entire wooden floor, overloaded with all that noble ego and armor, collapses. And where do they fall? Straight into the monastery's latrine pit. The cesspit. The giant medieval toilet. We're talking dozens of Germany's finest, drowning in actual human excrement. Reports say around 60 prominent figures met their incredibly undignified end, suffocating in centuries of accumulated… well, you get the picture. The king himself only survived because he was sitting in an alcove with a stone floor. Can you imagine the smell? The chaos? The sheer embarrassment for those who almost drowned. Talk about a crappy way to go down in history, literally. 2. So you're in medieval Europe and you're thinking, maybe having our 15th kid isn't the best idea right now, what with the plague and all. What are your birth control options? Well, forget science because that was mostly busy figuring out how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. Instead, you'd turn to some truly bizarre folk remedies. How about wearing an amulet made from a dried toad? Yes, a toad. Around your neck. Or perhaps you'd fancy inserting a pessary made of… wait for it. Crocodile dung. Yep, actual crocodile poop, strategically placed. Other popular choices included weasel testicles, because obviously, or drinking concoctions made from willow bark, which, okay, has some scientific basis for aspirin, but they weren't exactly doing clinical trials. The sheer desperation and, let's be honest, the gag-inducing nature of these methods just shows how wildly different their understanding of the human body was. Romantic evening, darling? Just let me grab my toad and dung. 3. Before Netflix, before HBO, before even basic cable, what did people do for thrilling entertainment? Well, if you were in medieval Europe, you'd grab the kids, pack a lunch, and head down to the town square for a public execution. Seriously, these weren't solemn, hidden affairs. They were massive public spectacles, the blockbusters of their day. People would travel for miles, vendors would sell food and drink, and a good spot with a clear view of the chopping block or gallows was highly sought after. It was part social event, part moral lesson, supposedly, and all grisly entertainment. Imagine the hype. This Friday, don't miss Thomas the Traitor getting drawn and quartered. Fun for the whole family. It's a bit like Netflix and Kill, only with actual killing, and much, much worse snacks. And you thought your reality TV was intense? 4. You think your legal system is weird? Hold my ale. In medieval times, it wasn't just humans who could end up in court. Oh no, animals got their day in front of a judge too. We're talking actual formal trials for creatures great and small. Pigs were notoriously common defendants, often charged with murdering children. And yes, they could be found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging or burning, sometimes even dressed in human clothes for the occasion. But it didn't stop there. Rats, weevils, locusts, even flies and caterpillars were put on trial for damaging crops or being general nuisances. They'd get court-appointed lawyers, witnesses would be called, and if found guilty, they might be excommunicated by the church or ordered to leave town. Imagine a lawyer earnestly arguing, "My client, Sir Reginald Roach, was merely seeking sustenance." It's utterly bonkers, but it shows a world where the lines between human and animal, sin and crime were fascinatingly blurry. 5. Let's talk about the ultimate medieval multi-tool, the golden elixir of… well, it wasn't exactly elixir, but it was definitely golden. I'm talking about urine. Yes, pee. Good old number one. In a world without advanced chemistry, aged urine was surprisingly useful stuff, primarily thanks to its ammonia content. Need to get your linens sparkling white? Forget bleach, soak them in stale pee. It was a common laundry aid. Got some tough animal hides you need to soften for leather? Urine was on the job for tanners. Some even claimed it was a fantastic antiseptic for wounds, though I'd probably take my chances with a bit of dirt, thanks. There are even accounts of it being used as a mouthwash for whiter teeth, though that might be more Roman. The principle of ammonia as a cleanser was understood. So next time you complain about chores, just be glad you don't have to collect the family's contributions for laundry day. The original eco-friendly solution, I guess? 6. The majestic medieval castle. Knights, dragons, fair maidens, and toilets that would give a modern health inspector a heart attack. Enter the garderobe. Sounds fancy, right? Like a walk-in closet for your robes. And sometimes it was near where clothes were stored, because the ammonia fumes from the, deposit below supposedly helped keep moths away. Smart? But the garderobe itself was essentially a stone or wooden seat with a hole, projecting out from the castle wall. And where did everything go? Straight down. Plop. Into the moat if you were lucky, or just onto the ground below if you weren't. Imagine being a besieging soldier trying to scale the walls and an unfortunate bomb lands from above. Talk about biological warfare. Privacy? Minimal. Toilet paper? A handful of hay, moss, or if you were really posh, a rag. The unsweet nightmare indeed. Truly the height of medieval convenience. 7. So you're living in the Middle Ages. You've just finished a hard day of, well, whatever hard days entailed back then, that didn't involve scrolling through social media. You're probably feeling a bit grimy. Time for a nice hot shower? Ha, good one. Bathing, as we know it, was a rare luxury and sometimes even viewed with suspicion. For many, a full-body wash might happen only a few times a year. If that, public bathhouses existed, sure, but they often had a reputation for being, shall we say, dens of iniquity, and some doctors even believed that hot water opened your pores to disease, the infamous miasma, or bad air. So people mostly made do with a quick splash of water on their hands and face. The overall aroma of a medieval town or a crowded room? Let's just say it would have been robust. Think of it. Your annual Christmas bath was a major event. Suddenly, that slightly musty smell in your gym bag doesn't seem so bad, does it? 8. Following on from the, infrequent bathing, how did medieval folks cope with the all-pervading stench of unwashed bodies, questionable sanitation, and general medievalness? Did they have super-strength Axe body spray? Not quite. Their solution was much more floral, literally. People carried around posies, small bouquets of fragrant flowers and herbs, or pomanders, which were little balls of aromatic substances like ambergris, musk, or spices, often in ornate metal cases. The idea wasn't to eliminate bad smells, an impossible task really, but to create a personal little bubble of slightly less offensive air around your nose. Picture a noble lady delicately sniffing her posy as she walks through a crowded market, or a gentleman holding his pomander aloft in a stuffy hall. It's a charming image until you realize they were doing it to avoid gagging on the smell of everyone, including themselves. Bless their fragrant little hearts for trying. 9. All right, let's talk about smiles in the Middle Ages. Or rather, the often terrifying lack thereof, because dental care was, to put it mildly, medieval. If you got a toothache, your options were grim. You could try rinsing your mouth with wine, which, hey, at least made the pain feel a bit further away for a moment. Or you could pray, a lot. Saint Apollonia was the go-to saint for tooth troubles, and people would beg her for relief. If divine intervention and booze failed, your next stop was often the local barber surgeon. Remember those guys? The haircut and amputation specialists? They were also your dentists. Their primary tool? A terrifying pair of pliers and a strong arm. Anesthesia? That was for wimps, or more accurately, largely non-existent. They just yank that sucker out, and you'd hope they got the right one and that you didn't die from the subsequent infection. Suddenly, a root canal sounds like a spa day, doesn't it? 10. Imagine sitting down for a hearty medieval feast. Juicy roasted meats, overflowing tankards of ale, and no plates? Well, not as we know them. Instead, you often got a trencher. What's a trencher, you ask? It was basically a thick, flat slab of stale bread, usually a few days old, so it was nice and hard. You'd pile your food onto this edible plate, and the bread would soak up all the lovely juices and grease. Delicious. Then, once you'd devoured the main course, you had a choice. If you were still hungry, you could eat your trencher. Talk about zero waste. If you were a generous soul, or perhaps just full, you might give your gravy-soaked bread plate to the poor, or toss it to the dogs eagerly waiting under the table. It's a brilliant system, really. No washing up, just more eating, or some very happy hounds. Though I do wonder about the structural integrity of a really soggy trencher. 11. Water in the Middle Ages was a bit like playing Russian roulette with your digestive system. Rivers were often open sewers, wells could be contaminated, and a sip from the wrong source could mean a week of regretting every life choice you've ever made, or worse. So, what did sensible medieval folks drink instead? Alcohol, and lots of it. Ale and wine were the beverages of choice for pretty much everyone, including children. Yes, little Timmy was probably enjoying a weak ale with his breakfast. It wasn't about getting wasted, though that certainly happened. It was about safety. The fermentation process killed off a lot of the nasty bacteria that made water so dangerous. So, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink, was a literal daily reality, unless you preferred it fermented and slightly intoxicating. Cheers to survival. 12. Spices in the Middle Ages were like gold. Pepper, cloves, nutmeg. These things were fantastically expensive, shipped over vast distances, and a real status symbol. If your host sprinkled some exotic spice on your food, you knew they were rolling in it. But beyond just showing off their wealth, these precious powders had another, slightly less glamorous purpose, masking the taste of food that was, let's say, past its prime. Refrigeration wasn't exactly a thing, and meat, in particular, had a tendency to get a bit funky, a bit ripe, a bit oh dear. Is that supposed to smell like that? A good dousing of strong spices could help cover up those off flavors, making a questionable piece of mutton suddenly seem almost palatable. So next time you enjoy a heavily spiced dish, just pause and wonder if your ancestors were culinary geniuses, or just really good at hiding the taste of impending food poisoning. 13. Friday rolls around, and if you're a devout medieval Christian, that means no meat. Fish only. But what if you're miles from the sea or just really fancy something a bit more substantial than a sad-looking trout? Enter the beaver. Yes, the industrious dam-building beaver. Now, you might be thinking, a beaver is a furry mammal, clearly not a fish. But you're not thinking with medieval ecclesiastical logic, because the beaver has a flat, scaly tail and spends a lot of time in the water. Some very clever, and presumably beaver-craving, church scholars declared that its tail, and sometimes even its hindquarters, counted as fish. Problem solved. You could happily munch on a juicy beaver tail and still be on the right side of religious dietary law. It's a hilariously convenient loophole, proving that where there's a will and a hungry congregation, there's a way to reclassify an entire animal. 14. Picture your local barbershop. Nice chairs, clean mirrors, maybe some magazines. Now, imagine that same barber, after giving you a neat trim and a shave, casually asks if you'd like him to sort out that pesky bladder stone, or perhaps let a bit of blood to cure your fever. Welcome to the world of the barber surgeon. These multi-talented individuals weren't just snipping hair. They were performing minor surgeries, pulling teeth, setting bones, and of course the ever-popular bloodletting. They were the workhorses of medieval medicine, especially for the common folk who couldn't afford a university-trained physician. The red and white striped barber's pole? It's said to represent blood and bandages. So you could get a short back and sides and potentially a life-threatening infection, all in one convenient and probably quite chatty location. What a service. 15. Got a headache? Feeling a bit down? Contracted the plague, bubonic or otherwise? Fear not, for the medieval medical world had a go-to, cure-all solution for practically everything that ailed you: bloodletting. The theory, based on the ancient idea of the four humors, was that most illnesses were caused by an excess of blood. So, naturally, the solution was to get rid of some of it. Barber surgeons or physicians would whip out a lancet or employ some hungry leeches, and out it would come. How much? Well, that depended. Sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. Did it work? Almost certainly not for most conditions, and it probably made many people weaker and more susceptible to, actually dying. But hey, it was something to do, and it looked very medical and important. Feeling a bit off, mate? Let's just drain a pint or two, you'll be right as rain. Or dead. One of the two. 16. If you thought your eccentric aunt with her crystals and essential oils was out there, you haven't met the medieval quack doctor. These characters roamed the land, promising miraculous cures for everything from baldness to demonic possession, often with ingredients that would make a modern pharmacist weep. How about a little mummy powder? Yes, actual ground-up Egyptian mummies, for your ailments? Or perhaps some unicorn horn, which was usually narwhal tusk, to ward off poison? Animal dung, powdered gemstones, bizarre herbal concoctions brewed under a full moon while chanting backwards. Nothing was too weird if it sold a cure. Many of these doctors were charismatic showmen, more interested in your coin purse than your constitution. And the treatments? Often ineffective, sometimes dangerous, and almost always hilariously disgusting. It makes you appreciate a simple aspirin, doesn't it? 17. Think your dinner parties have awkward moments? Try attending a medieval feast where the table manners would make a hyena blush. Spitting on the floor? Perfectly acceptable in many circles, as long as you didn't aim for someone important. Belching loudly after a satisfying meal? That was often seen as a compliment to the chef. Wiping your greasy hands on the tablecloth, or even on your own clothes if a dog wasn't handy to lick them clean? Sure, why not? And speaking of dogs, they were often welcome guests under the table, ready to snap up any bones or scraps you generously tossed their way. Sharing a communal drinking cup with several other people, some of whom might have questionable dental hygiene or a hacking cough? Standard practice. It was a free-for-all of bodily functions and shared germs. Suddenly, that cousin who double dips the chips doesn't seem so bad. 18. We've talked about garderobes, those delightful castle toilets. But who had the truly glamorous job of cleaning out all those latrines, cesspits, and privy vaults, especially in towns and cities? Enter the gong farmer, or nightman. This was, without a doubt, one of the worst, smelliest, and most disgusting jobs in the medieval world. These brave or perhaps just desperate souls worked at night, hence nightman, to empty out the accumulated human waste. They'd shovel it into carts and haul it away, usually to dispose of it outside the city walls or sell it as fertilizer. The pay was sometimes decent because, well, who else wanted to do it? But the social stigma and the sheer olfactory assault must have been overwhelming. Imagine their Tinder profile. Gong farmer, enjoys long nights, fresh air when I can get it, and not talking about work. A truly noble, if utterly revolting, profession. 19. So, you've been accused of a crime in medieval times. You swear you're innocent, but there's no CCTV, no DNA evidence, just your word against theirs. How do you prove your innocence? Why, through a trial by ordeal, of course. This was basically asking God to perform a little miracle to show you were telling the truth. Common ordeals included carrying a red-hot iron bar for a set distance. Your hand would be bandaged, and if, after a few days, it was healing nicely without festering, then huzzah! God had declared you innocent. If it was a disgusting, pus-filled mess, well, you were guilty, and probably about to lose your hand anyway. Another favorite was trial by water, being thrown into a river with your hands tied. If you sank, you were innocent, but possibly drowned, which was a bit of a downside. If you floated, the water, being pure, had rejected you, meaning you were guilty. It's a win-win for absolutely no one involved, except maybe the spectators. 20. Fashion is pain, darling, and nowhere was this truer than with medieval footwear, specifically the krakows or poulaines. These were shoes with ridiculously long pointed toes. We're not talking an extra inch or two. We're talking points that could extend 6 inches, a foot. or even for the truly fashion-forward nobleman, up to 2 feet beyond the actual toes. Imagine trying to walk, let alone navigate crowded medieval streets or, heaven forbid, stairs, with these things. It was so impractical that sometimes the points had to be stuffed with moss or whalebone to keep their shape, or even chained to the wearer's knees to stop them from tripping over their own fabulousness. The church condemned them as devil's talons and symbols of vanity. Naturally, this only made them more popular among the rebellious youth. Just picture a medieval dad. You're not going out with shoes that pointy, young man. 21. If men were peacocking with their pointy shoes, noble women were reaching for the sky with their headdresses, particularly the hennin. This was a tall, conical, or steeple-shaped hat, often draped with a flowing veil. Think fairy tale princess, but with serious aerodynamic challenges. Some hennins could be a foot, 2 feet, or even 3 feet high. They were a major status symbol. The taller your hat, the higher your rank, presumably. But imagine the practical difficulties. Walking through a standard medieval doorway? Good luck. You'd either have to perfect a very deep curtsy-like stoop, tilt your head at a precarious angle, or just accept that your fancy hat was going to take a beating. Knights probably had an easier time jousting than a lady in a hennin had navigating a crowded ballroom. Doorways. 1. Hennins. 0. Usually. 22. Medieval marriage. A beautiful union of 2 souls brought together by land, money, and strategic alliances. Romance? Love? Those were lovely bonuses if they happened, but they certainly weren't the primary drivers for most noble or wealthy families. Marriages were often arranged when the bride and groom were still children, sometimes even infants, to secure property, consolidate power, or forge peace treaties. The young couple might not even meet until their wedding day. It was less, "Will you marry me?" and more, "Our lawyers have drafted the prenup, sign here." For commoners, there might have been a bit more personal choice, but economic stability and ensuring the continuation of the family farm or trade were still paramount. So if you're stressing about your dating app matches, just be glad you're not being traded for a couple of prize-winning pigs and an acre of land. 23. In our modern world, personal space is sacred. We have our own bedrooms, our own beds. In the Middle Ages? Not so much. For many families, especially peasants, everyone piled into one bed or onto a communal sleeping platform to conserve warmth. We're talking parents, kids, maybe a visiting relative, and quite possibly a few friendly farm animals like chickens or even a piglet if it was particularly cold. Imagine the snoring, the kicking, the fleas. Oh, the fleas. Privacy was a foreign concept. If you were a guest in a castle or inn, you might find yourself sharing a bed with complete strangers. It was all very cozy, in a packed like sardines in a can full of livestock and parasites kind of way. Makes that lumpy mattress at your in-laws' place seem like a 5-star resort, doesn't it? 24. Home sweet home. In the Middle Ages often meant home smoky, dark, and slightly damp home. Most peasant dwellings were simple 1- or 2-room huts, often with thatched roofs, wattle and daub walls, and earthen floors. Windows were small, usually just unglazed openings with wooden shutters, to keep out the worst of the weather and, presumably, curious squirrels. Central heating? That was the open hearth in the middle of the room, with the smoke hopefully, finding its way out through a hole in the roof or a poorly sealed gable. More often, it just filled the room, leaving everything and everyone covered in a fine layer of soot and smelling perpetually of wood smoke. Fresh air was something you experienced outside. Inside, it was a fragrant blend of smoke, unwashed bodies, cooking smells, and maybe a hint of nearby livestock. The rustic charm. 25. Forget incognito mode. In a medieval village or town, everyone knew everything about you. Your business was their business. The lack of privacy was staggering by modern standards. Houses were crammed close together, walls were thin, and people lived much of their lives outdoors or in communal spaces. Who you were courting, what you had for dinner, your latest argument with your spouse, that embarrassing rash you developed, chances are your neighbors were fully briefed. Gossip was a major form of entertainment and information exchange. If you did something scandalous, the whole village would know before you'd even finish doing it. It's like living in a reality TV show you never signed up for, and everyone has a front row seat and very strong opinions. No secrets were safe in the cozy, claustrophobic world of medieval community. 26. Before germ theory, before X-rays, before WebMD made everyone a hypochondriac, medical understanding was dominated by the four humors theory. This ancient Greek idea, which persisted through the Middle Ages, proposed that the human body contained four essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your health and personality were determined by the balance of these humors. Too much blood? You were sanguine, cheerful, and optimistic. Too much phlegm? Phlegmatic, calm, perhaps a bit sluggish. An excess of yellow bile made you choleric, fiery, and bad-tempered. And too much black bile? That made you melancholic, sad, and broody. Illness was seen as an imbalance of these humors, and treatments, like bloodletting or prescribing certain foods, aimed to restore that balance. It's a wonderfully simplistic system that made absolutely zero scientific sense. But hey, it lasted for over 1,000 years. 27. Think modern football or soccer is a tough sport. You haven't seen anything like medieval football. This wasn't a game of elegant footwork and strategic passes. It was often a chaotic, violent brawl involving entire villages. The ball could be an inflated pig's bladder, or sometimes even something more macabre. Rules? What rules? The objective was usually to get the ball to a specific landmark, often miles away, by any means necessary. This involved a massive scrum of people kicking, punching, gouging, and trampling each other. Broken bones were common, serious injuries frequent, and deaths not unheard of. It was less sport and more organized riot with a vaguely spherical object. Kings sometimes tried to ban it because it distracted from archery practice, the more militarily useful pastime. But the people loved their brutal village versus village mayhem. 28. In the rigid hierarchy of the medieval court, speaking truth to power was a surefire way to lose your head. Unless, that is, you were the court jester. These fools, often dressed in motley costumes with bells on their hats, had a unique license to mock, satirize, and criticize everyone, including the king himself. They used wit, riddles, and outrageous behavior to point out uncomfortable truths or the absurdities of courtly life, all under the guise of entertainment. A good jester was intelligent, quick-witted, and possessed a keen understanding of human nature. They were the original stand-up comedians and political satirists, walking a fine line between amusement and offense. It was a risky job. A joke that fell flat with a sensitive monarch could still have serious consequences. But for those who mastered it, they were the only ones who could truly roast the king and live to tell the tale. 29. We live in a world of science and verifiable facts, mostly. But in the Middle Ages, the line between the real and the fantastical was much blurrier. For your average peasant and even many nobles, dragons weren't just creatures of myth. They were a potential, albeit rare, threat. Griffins, those majestic eagle-lion hybrids, totally plausible. Sea monsters lurking in the uncharted oceans. Absolutely. These creatures populated their maps, their stories, and their fears. Bestiaries, or books of beasts, described these fantastical animals alongside real ones like lions and elephants, often with little distinction between fact and fable. It wasn't that they were stupid. It was a world with vast unexplored regions where strange tales came back from distant lands and where the supernatural was an accepted part of daily existence. So, if you heard a strange noise outside your village at night, you might genuinely wonder if it was a wolf or, a griffin looking for a snack. 30. Got a problem? In the Middle Ages, there was a saint for that. Seriously, for almost every conceivable ailment, profession, or unfortunate situation, there was a specific patron saint you could petition for help. Lost your keys? Pray to Saint Anthony of Padua? Got a sore throat? Saint Blaise was your guy. Worried about lightning strikes? Saint Barbara had you covered. There were saints for brewers, saints for travelers, saints for people with toothaches. Hello again, Saint Apollonia. And even saints to protect against rats and mice. It was a highly specialized celestial support system. This devotion to saints provided comfort and a sense of control in a world full of uncertainty and danger. Plus, it gave you someone specific to blame if things didn't work out. Saint Anthony, I've been praying for a week. Where are my darn keys? 31. Think fashion police are a modern invention? Think again. Medieval society had sumptuary laws, which were basically rules about what you could and couldn't wear based on your social class and income. These laws dictated the types of fabric, colors, furs, and even the amount of ornamentation allowed for different ranks. A peasant wearing luxurious velvet or sporting too much fancy embroidery? Scandalous. That was reserved for the nobility. The idea was to maintain social order and prevent commoners from looking above their station. Penalties for breaking these fashion laws could range from fines to confiscation of the offending garments, or even public shaming. So, if you were a medieval merchant who suddenly got rich, you couldn't just go out and buy the flashiest outfit. You had to dress according to your legally defined place in the world. Talk about a buzzkill for your shopping spree. Sorry, sir, that ermine trim is for barons only. Off with your tunic. 32. Medieval law books were treasure troves of the truly bizarre and wonderfully specific. Sure, there were laws against murder and theft, but then there were the real gems. For instance, in some parts of England, it was reportedly illegal to sing an ugly carol during Christmas. A crime against festive cheer, apparently. There were laws regulating the length of a dagger a man could carry, laws dictating when and where you could play dice or tennis, often forbidden for the lower classes, lest it distract from work or archery. In some towns, it was mandatory for men to practice archery on Sundays. Imagine getting fined for not being good enough at Deck the Halls or for skipping your weekend bow and arrow practice. It just shows that medieval lawmakers had a lot of time on their hands and some very particular ideas about how society should function. 33. No smartphones, no internet, no 500 channels of cable TV. How on earth did medieval people kill time and entertain themselves? Well, for the nobility there was hunting, hawking, and tournaments. For everyone else, things got a bit more rustic. Village festivals were huge, often involving copious amounts of ale, feasting, dancing, and games that could get pretty rough. Think less organized sports, more chaotic brawls. Animal-based entertainment was also tragically popular. Bear baiting, where a chained bear was set upon by dogs, or cockfighting, were common spectacles. People gambled on dice, played board games like chess and backgammon, or their medieval equivalents, listened to traveling minstrels, and of course engaged in the age-old pastime of gossip. It was a world where you made your own fun, often with a healthy dose of alcohol and a cheerful disregard for animal welfare or personal safety. 911. So the Middle Ages. Less fairy tale glamour. More, hold my ale and watch this absolute disaster unfold. After that parade of historical horrors and truly mind-boggling daily grinds, here's the million-dollar question. What's the one single, solitary medieval norm we unearthed today that doesn't just make you cringe, but has you sprinting back to the 21st century, profoundly grateful for Wi-Fi, antibiotics, and basic sanitation? I want your most visceral, I'd rather wrestle a plague-ridden badger choice in the comments below. If this dive into glorious historical insanity made your brain tingle or your stomach churn, obliterate that like button and slam subscribe for more unbelievable truths they conveniently forgot to teach you.